Welcome back to Ayaz Tech. In today's video, we are diving into how to implement caching in Angular 17. We will cover various techniques including caching through services and observables, handling query parameters and request bodies using interceptors. We will cover both approaches in interceptors. First one would be the temporary storage, so that would be reset whenever you reload your browser. But if you want to preserve the cache, then we will use the local storage that will preserve the cache, and even if you reload the page, it will recover the cache from the local storage. By the end of this video, you will have a solid understanding of how to optimize your Angular apps with efficient caching. So let's get started. So we will implement a simple caching mechanism using a service and observables. This method is straightforward and perfect for beginners. So first of all, if you don't have any Angular project, then you should create a new Angular project by running this command ng-new angular -caching. You can give it whatever name you prefer. Choose the default options for simplicity. Once project is created, you have to go to that project folder by using the cd command and the project name. Okay, then you should open it in your favorite editor. I'm using VS Code, so if I just type code space dot, it will open the existing folder in my VS Code. So just open the VS Code and then you can open the project folder through the terminal, or you can click on the file and open folder and load your project folder into the VS Code, and then you can start. So now we need to generate a service. So that would be the caching service. This service will handle the storage and retrieval of cached data. So let's do that. Open the new terminal in the root directory of your project and run the command ng-generate s for service and the name of the service that you want to generate. I want to generate cache, so just use that, press enter. Alright, the service has been generated. Now in this service, I will create a property private cache is equal to new map, and this is going to have a key of type string and with the any value type. Now we need to create a get function and a set function. So get function would be used to get the to retrieve the cache from the cache service, and set would be used to save the additional cache. So get method will expect one parameter key of type string and it will return the observable. And make sure to import the observable from rxjs, and the returned observable will contain the value of type any, and it can also have the null value in the response as well. Now let's return something. Return this dot cache has key, and so I'm using the ternary operator to add my condition. So if this condition is true, if this key was found in our cache, then we will return the observable, and for that I will use off function. Off function should be imported from the rxjs, so make sure to import it first. Once it is imported, you can call it to create the observable from the value of this key by using this .cache.get key, and if nothing was found under that key, you will simply return the null. Now we need to create a set function that will receive two parameters, key of type string and value of type string, or it can be any. Okay, and this is going to return nothing, so I will specify the type of response void, and now in the logic I will consume the key and value to prepare the cache. Okay, now we need to use the caching service in the data service, but for that we have to generate it first. So let's create a data service that will use the caching service to fetch and cache the data. So ng-generate s data would create that service. Okay, the service has been created. Now here I will inject the HTTP client service and the cache service. But before using the HTTP client service, we have to provide it in the app.config. So in the Angular 17, we have the app.config.ts, and in this providers array, we have to add the function provide HTTP client. Make sure to import this function from angular/common/http and then call that function. Okay, with that, the HTTP client is available throughout your entire application. Okay, now let's use it here. So now first of all, I need to inject the HTTP client service. For that, I will define the private variable HTTP and is equal to inject. So this is also another way to inject any service. So we can inject the service with the help of the constructor as well, but this is also another approach that you can use, and I think it is easier. Okay, now let's pass it the service HTTP client. So make sure to import this service. Make sure to add the import syntax to import it from the angular/common/http. Now let's inject the cache service and use the inject function, and make sure to import the cache service. Okay, now I will define a method get data, and this method will receive or expect a parameter of type string, and we are calling it URL, and this will return an observable. Make sure to import the observable from RxJS, and this observable will contain a value of type any. Okay, now I will define a variable or constant cached response is equal to this dot cache service dot get URL. So here we are getting the cache based on this URL. So here URL is basically our key in our case. So if there is a cache value available against that key, then we will get it. If not, then we will make an HTTP call. So here if cached response, then return the cached response as it is to avoid the HTTP call, and otherwise we will return this dot HTTP dot get, use the URL dot pipe. So in this pipe function we will have to pass the operators. So we will use only one operator from RxJS, so that would be tap. Make sure to import the tap observable tap operator, and that function expect a callback function, and that callback function will receive a parameter response, and then we will use this dot cache service dot set URL and response. So here we are updating our cache service to add an additional item into it with the this is the key and this is the value for that. Okay, save it. Now we need to use the data service in the component. So for that I am going to generate a component, ng generate C for component, and the name of the component would be articles. Okay, so the component has been generated. So this component will display the data fetched from the data service. So open the articles.component.ts, and here I will define a property or variable articles of type any array is equal to empty array. Okay, and now I will inject a service with the name data service. I can set it private data service and is equal to inject. Make sure to import the inject function here as well, and now I will pass it the data service. So data service is also imported. Now I will define a constructor here. In this constructor we will load the data by using this dot data service dot get data, and now I will pass it the URL from where I want to fetch data. So okay, the URL has been added. Now we can subscribe to the response. So in this subscribe function we have to pass the callback function that will receive the data, and we will use that data to update the value of the articles. This dot articles is equal to data. Okay, now let's display this data in the articles.component.html. So create a div here, and actually we have to wrap that div in the for loop. So for that we'll use this syntax, and here I will use the variable name article of articles and track article.id. Okay, now within that div I will add the heading and the paragraph for the article body. Save it. Now we need to display this articles.component.html in the app.component.html. For that, I have to import the articles.component in the app.component. So we can directly import it in the imports array because this is a standalone component of Angular 17. So let's do that. Articles component, make sure to import this component as well. Now go back to the app.component.html and let's try to use the app-articles. Save it. Now let's go back to the Chrome or browser where you are testing, and you will notice that the data is visible. I'm going to remove all of these styles. Okay, so you can see all of the articles are being loaded. Now I want to show you that this is really using the cache. So it will once it has made request to the backend, it will not send the same request again. Next time for future requests, it will consume the cache data. So to demonstrate that, I have to add some changes in the app in the articles component. For that, in the articles.html on the top, I will add a button that would say clear all articles, and on this button click, we will update the articles array to the empty array. Okay, and go to the articles.component.ts, and I will create a function that would say load articles, and we will move the logic from the constructor to the load articles function, and in the constructor we will simply call the start load articles. Okay, so first time it will call the function and execute this logic, and then on button click we will create another button, and on that button click we will load the articles. Okay, so on click I will use the function load articles. Save it. Now let's look at that in the browser. We have both of these buttons. Now here I am going to click on clear all articles, and if I click on this button, then articles would be loaded back. So let me show you something from the inspect element. So go to the network tab and reload the page. So for the first time you will see that a request has been made and it is being shown in the network tab. So if you click on the clear all articles, then all of the articles have been removed from the articles array. But if you click on the load article, it will look at our existing cache and try to find the relevant data from it. But if data was not found, then it will hit the HTTP, it will hit the API URL. But if data was found, then it will never hit that API. So let's try that. Click on the load articles, and you can see that the articles have been loaded, but there was no additional API request in the network tab. So you can delete all articles, click on that again. Every time you can see it is very quick because of the cache. Otherwise it would have to hit the backend API and wait for the response. But now it does not have to wait for the backend. It has the data available in the cache, so it is just instantly loading the data from there. Next, let's extend our caching service to handle query parameters and request bodies. So this is essential for more dynamic API requests. So let's go to the cache service, but before that let me commit these changes for you so that you can find them on the GitHub. So the benefit of the frequent commits is that you can follow step by step. You can go commit by commits to see the gradual progress on this tutorial. So git add would add it to the staging, and then git commit -m how to implement caching with cache service, and press enter. Okay, now let's go back to the cache service, and here I will create another function that would be private generate cache key, and this would be expecting 3 parameters: URL of type string, params of type any, and body of type any. Okay, and then it will return the value of type string. And now let's return something. We will combine the URL, parameters, and body all together into one single string, and then we will return it. The benefit of this approach is that the key would be unique based on the different parameters and body request body items. So let's do that. I am using the backticks to add the JavaScript within the string. Okay. All right. I am stringify the params because this might be object, and I am also stringifying the body because this is also going to be object. Okay, save it. So this will help us to generate the unique cache key. All right. Now let's update the get function. Earlier we were expecting only one parameter, but now we need to receive three parameters. First one would be the URL of type string, and second parameter would be the params of type any, and the default value would be the empty object, and for the third parameter would be the body of type any, and similarly the default value would be the empty object. Save it. Now here I need to generate a unique key by using the combination of all these three parameters. So for that we already have created a helper function, generate cache key. So I will use that. So first I will create a constant with the name key, this dot generate cache key, and pass it all three parameters. Great. Now we need to update the set function, and in the set function we need to update the parameters. We need to receive total four parameters. First one would be the URL of type string. Second one would be the params of type any with the default value of empty array. And third one would be the body of type any with the default value empty object. And value would be the fourth parameter with the type any. Okay. Now here I need to generate my unique key like we did earlier in the get function. So I created a variable or constant key and generated the cache key. Okay, so once we get the key, we will pass that key to the set function and we will pass the value. Okay, now we need to update the data service accordingly to adjust these changes. So in the get data function, I need to update the parameter. So now we will have total two parameters. First one would be the string, and second one would be the params of type any with the default value object, empty object. And after that, in the get function, we have to pass the params as well that we are receiving from the parameters. Now we will update this else part. Here I will define the http params variable or constant, and we will use the http params class from the angular/common/http. So make sure to import it as well to make it work. Now within that I will pass the object that will have a property from object and give it the object that we want to use. We have the object in the params parameter. Now in this get function, I will pass the additional parameter that would be an object, and that will have a property params, and we will give it the http params that we just created. Now in the pipe function, we have to pass total four parameters. Right now there are only two, and first one would be the URL, second one would be the params this time, third one would be the empty object, and fourth one would be the response. Okay, so this will perfectly work for the different query string variables, but in some rare cases, mostly you may not need to cache the post HTTP requests, but in case if you need to, you can follow this function. So this is just for demonstration. So use post data URL of type string and body of type any, and this will obviously return the observable of type any. And here I will create a constant cached response is equal to this dot cache service dot get URL empty object and body, and we will check again if cache response was found, then return it as it is. Don't hit the backend API. But if the cache was not found, then we will hit the backend API by using this dot http dot post URL comma body dot pipe. So everything would stay same like it was in the get data function. So this is how you will cache the post requests as well. Anyways, now we need to test this get data function to verify that it is really useful. So for that, Let's go to the articles.component.ts, and here you can pass a second argument as parameters that will have object with different properties in it. So every property would act as a query parameter, query string variable. So let's say I want to use offset is equal to 0 and limit would be 10. So now if you check that in the network, all of those properties have been added as the query string variable in our HTTP request and are the part of this URL of the backend. Okay, so to properly test this, we need to create two inputs in the HTML that will update the values of offset and limits, because right now we have hard coded them. There is no way to update them. So we will create two inputs on the top. Input type text, and we are going to use ng model, and here we will pass the name of the variable that we are going to create in the component file offset. It is giving us error because we did not import the forms module yet, so let's do that. In the articles.component.ts, in the imports array, I will add the forms module. In this way the error will be gone. Now we just need to define this and second variable in the ts file. So let's do that. Offset will have the default value of 0 and limit will have the default value of 10. Now instead of hard coding these values, we will use these new variables, this dot offset. Okay, save it. Now let's test it. So reloaded. So for the first time it used these two values in the URL as the query string variables, and now if you click on the clear all articles, then array is now empty. And now if you click on the load articles, you will see that the data has been loaded without making an additional API request. But if I make any change in these values, so for example I set it from 0 to 1, now if you click on the load article, this time it will make an additional request because the query string variable was changed. But after that, if you clear all articles and click on the load article, you will see that it will not hit the backend API again. So it will make additional API request only if the query string variables were updated, otherwise not. So now it should make, actually this is not being used. Let me see what's wrong here. Limit. Oh, here I was using the same variable 2 times, that's why it did not work. So let me fix that. Sorry about that. Okay, save it. Now make sure to save this file as well. Now if you clear all articles, load it again, no extra API request, make changes, click it again, no extra API request. Okay, and now I will update the limit input as well. Clear the articles, click on the load articles again. There would be only one request, and after that you will not see any additional API requests in the network tab. So I hope that you see how this update has made things very useful and dynamic. Now it's time to commit, and then we will move to the interceptors. So let's do that. Okay, the changes have been made. Now it's time to move on to the caching with interceptors. So let's implement caching using HTTP interceptors. This approach allows you to cache all HTTP requests globally. So right now things are not global yet because you have to use this function, or for example you have hundreds of functions that interact with the backend. So you have to create these kind of functions everywhere, every time. You have to manage the cache. You have to get and set cache manually every time. So that is so much repetition that you want to avoid. So to reuse the logic, the interceptors are best in those situations. So let's do that. First of all, I need to generate an interceptor. For that, run the command ng generate service. Actually you can use ng generate interceptor and give it the name cache. That will immediately generate the interceptor for us with the default basic code. Now in this interceptor I need to create a private I need to create a constant cache is equal to new map with the key with the key of type string and the value of type any. Now here I will check if request.method is equal to get, because in this I am not going to focus toward the post method. You can implement the post logic as well, it is same like we did here, but for now we'll just focus on the get method. So we are checking if method is not get. If it is post, then just return the request as it is. We don't want to make any modification to it, or we don't want to do anything. And if it is a get method, then below we will write our logic. So here I will create a constant cached response is equal to this.cache.get, and we will pass it request.url with params. Save it. Actually, we don't need to use this because this is not a class, this is a variable, so just use it as it is. Okay, now I will use a if condition. If cached response is found, then use it. So I will just return an observable in this way of, make sure to import the of function from rxjs and pass that cached response. But if the cached response was not found, then we will let it return the next function with the request. So here we are basically breaking the HTTP request. We don't want to execute the HTTP request at all, because if we don't do that, it will make an HTTP request and that will hit the backend API. So we just return that in the middle. But if we really want to resume or continue the HTTP call, then we can use this next function, but we will add a pipe function on it, and within that pipe function I will pass the operator of rxjs, that would be tap. Make sure to import the tap operator from the rxjs, and I will pass it a callback function that will receive a parameter with the name event. And now we will check if event, then we will use this.cache.set request.url with params and pass the second argument, that would be the event. Again, don't use the this, that was a mistake. So here we are checking if in this interceptor the event is of type HTTP response. So that's mean the HTTP request has been made. Now we are getting the final output from the backend. So we want to save or preserve that response in the cache. So we are basically giving our cache a key, and then we are passing the value to our cache. Okay, save it. Now it's time to test it. So but before testing that, we have to provide that interceptor globally to our entire application. For that, go to the app.config.ts, where we have added the provide HTTP client function already. Within that function call, we will call another function that would be with interceptors. So make sure to import the with interceptors from the angular/common/http, and within that function call we have to pass an array. Within that array we can pass multiple interceptors, but for now we have just one interceptor, that is cache interceptor. Make sure to import this interceptor as well. Save it. So with that change, this interceptor has been integrated with our entire application altogether out of the box. We don't have to do anything after this, so everything would be handled automatically. Now we can delete our services, like we can delete the cache service. Let me actually delete all of the code from it for now, because we don't need that, and we don't need the data service as well. So I'm going to delete this as well. Okay, now in the articles.component.ts, we don't need to use the data service anymore, so I will remove the code from here and from here as well. And instead of this, I will simply use the HTTP client directly. So here I will inject the HTTP client service by using the inject function and pass it the HTTP client service. Okay, now let's use that. Here I will use http.get, and we need to pass it the params. So for that I will create a constant here, http params is equal to new http params, and pass it an object with the property from object, and then give it the parameters that you want to use. So these are the parameters that I want to use, so I will use it as the value of the from object property. Okay, now here in the second argument I have passed an object with the property params, and then we will pass it the http params. Okay, so here I will add type any. So now this error will be gone. Save it. Okay, now it's time to test it. So now let's do the same experiment again. Clear all of the articles, click on the load, all article load. It is not working. So something is wrong here. The reason is that whenever a new HTTP call is made, this function is executed from scratch, and whenever this function is executed, this variable is defined, and at that time there was no cache. So on every request it starts a new cache from empty state. Okay, so that's mean we have to move it in somewhere like service, because service is singleton that persist maintain the state throughout the entire life cycle of your application until you reload the page. Okay, so we can move it from here to the cache service, and now I have to inject the cache service. So for that, use the constant cache service is equal to, I will use the inject function to inject that service and import the cache service as well. Okay, once that is done, we will define a variable const cache, and we will get the cache from the cache service, and now this would be used. Okay, now let's try. I'm getting error that cache does not exist on the type cache service. So let's see what's wrong there. Okay, now it's fine. It was not saved properly. Anyways, now if you clear all articles, click on the load. This time there is no extra request going. And now if you make some change in the keystring variable and click on the load article, this will send an additional request to the backend. But for the next request, it will not send the HTTP request. And similarly, let's update that. And this time it has sent the backend request for the first time, but now it is not sending any more request to the backend API. Okay, that is working great. But one thing is that when you reload the page, all of the cache would be destroyed because the service would be initialized from the scratch. So it will not remember your cache anymore. So you can see if I make, so whenever you reload, it sends an additional request. So one last thing that I want to implement is that we want to preserve this cache in a way that it doesn't reset even if you reload the page. It should preserve it or persist it. Okay, so for that we will use the local storage. So let's create a set function. So actually here, instead of map, I can just simply use the empty object. Okay, and in the set function we will receive the data, we will receive the key and data. Okay, and now I can update the cache and we will save it. Let me add the type any here for now, and here I will add the type string, and here for data we will have type any. Now I will save it in the local storage. Okay, for that I will use local storage dot set item and give it the key and stringified version of the cache. Save it. Now we need to define the get function, so that will receive the key, and now we will return this dot cache key. So if the cache was found against that key, then we will return it. Otherwise we will get the cache from the local storage and parse it. Okay, so we are getting the error here that it can be null. So let me cut it from here. I will create a variable, let local storage cache is equal to this, and here we will add a condition. If the data was not found in the local storage, we will just set an empty string here. Okay, now we will use this local storage variable. Now I will use that variable to parse it. Okay, so now if the local storage string was found, we will parse it, and return it. So in the set function, I will receive the key and value, and I will save it in the cache variable. Further, I will create a local storage item, set item with the name cache, and then I will stringify this .cache and save it as the value of that. Okay, and now I will create a get function that will receive the key, and then we will first check if cache has the key. We will check if a value is available in the cache variable against that key. We will return that as it is. Okay, otherwise we have to check the cache. So we are getting the cache from the local storage, and now we'll check if the cache is found from the local storage. We will parse it and update the variable of this service, and also we will return the value against this key from this cache, save it. Okay, now let's go back to the cache interceptor, and here we will not use the cache directly. Okay, so here we will not use the cache property directly. We will basically use the get function. So I will basically just remove everything from here. Here I will use cache service.get function, and I have passed it the key. Similarly, here I will use the same cache service and call the set function on it. Okay, everything would stay same. Now let's see the magic. So when you reload the page, first time you saw that this API request went through to the backend, but if you reload it, next time you will not see any request. But there is some problem, it did not work. So let's see what's wrong. Okay, after every change, as it is not working properly. Even if I go to the application and clear the local storage, for the first time it will work, but if you reload it, it will not work. Okay, the reason is that when we save it, it stringify the object. There might be some functions or something that lose its original structure when we stringify it. So that's why the things doesn't work correctly. So the best way to fix is that you need to use new HTTP response and pass it the response that you want to send. Okay, so in this way it will work every time. So reload it, you can see, go to the network tab, actually reload it, you will see that there is no request going to the backend. But if you close the tab and open the tab again, still you will see it is loading data very quickly and there is no network request. Okay, and if you clear and click on that again, it will still work. If you update the number, click on that, it will still work, and it is sending additional request. Delete and click on the load articles again, and this time there is no additional requests. So same for the limit input as well. So for the first time with the limit of 103, it will work, but if it will send the backend API request. But if you clear and click on the load articles button again, this time it will not send any additional requests, and if you reload it, things will still be working without any need of backend HTTP request. And also go to the application and local storage, and here you can see the cache that you are saving here. Okay, so this is the key with the name cache, and it has all of the values that you have saved. So this is the object that you have saved. So these are the keys of every cache, and these are the values. So if I expand one of these, you will notice we have the body, headers, and other properties. And if you open this one, you will see everyone has a different offset or different key string variables. That's why a separate entry was created in the cache. So all right, I think that's all what I wanted to show you in this video. Thank you for watching this detailed tutorial on how to implement caching in Angular 17. I hope you found it valuable and practical. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Your support helps the YouTube algorithm grow our channel and motivates me to create more content for you. For more detailed articles and source codes, visit my blog at ayaztech.com, and see you in the next video.